All eyes were on the Supreme Court this week as the justices released their rulings on several controversial topics, including the Defense of Marriage Act and the Voting Rights Act. In this excerpt from Oklahoma Forum, law professors Rick Tepker and Andrew Spiropoulos discussed the decisions and what they mean for Oklahoma.
As a practical matter, looking at the DOMA case, looking at the Prop 8 case from California, reading those together, what does it all mean going forward?
The war continues. This is a temporary victory in some ways for the people who want to advance same-sex marriage, but what we're going to have is a lot more litigation on this issue. The big case hasn't happened yet. It's on the horizon. It looks pretty good in terms of the prognosis for same-sex marriage on the court, but we're still one big step away, and it remains to be seen whether the court will do it.
By pretty good, what do you mean?
Well, I think it's, for certain, you have 4 votes in favor of declaring same-sex marriage a constitutional right. And it's hard to imagine how Justice Kennedy can get out of the arguments that he has made, that favoring traditional marriage can only be motivated by animus. It is hard to understand how he's going to argue himself out of the position. Now, if anyone's capable of contradicting himself and coming up with some reason, it's Justice Kennedy. But if you have the same court that you have now deciding this issue, it's hard to see how Kennedy gets out of the box that he's in, or whether he even wants to get out of the box that he's in. But if this case comes up 2 to 4 years from now, it may not be the same court.
Yeah.
So who knows what will happen.
Where does this go?
The war continues, but I agree with Justice Scalia's, his feelings, pessimistic view. I believe this doctrine points toward a direction based upon Lawrence in this case, where equal dignity and equal respect for an individual's right to share a life and enjoy the same civil and legal consequences from that contracted share of life. And I think that's going to be given equal protection.
Will marriage still be left up to the states, or is that going to change?
Well, if it goes in the direction that we're discussing, it's going to change. The states like Oklahoma will not be able to have the law that it has. And that didn't happen this week, but that's the next decision. That's what's on the horizon. I think Justice Alito put it well in his dissent, is that we have 2 fundamentally different views of marriage in this country. The question is how is that dispute going to be resolved? Is it going to be resolved by politics, or is it going to be resolved by the next case, the Supreme Court? It wasn't resolved this year, but it can be resolved in the future. And if it goes the way that it looks like it's going, then states like Oklahoma will not be able to implement their own view of marriage in law.
And there are 36 states right now that ban same-sex.
Depending how you count California.
Yeah, exactly. Another key opinion was Shelby County, Alabama versus Holder. That's the Voting Rights Act case. What did the court do in that decision?
Well, I think I'm going to put it a little bluntly. It gutted the most important civil rights act in the history of the country by eliminating the coverage formula because it had not been kept up to date. It effectively prevented the pre-clearance power of the Justice Department. And a good example of the consequence of that is Texas immediately moved to push its voter ID law. The issues of voter discrimination are not the same as they were in 1965, but they're still real. They are still race-related.
Again, you have to understand how enormous a departure this section of the Voting Rights Act was from the norm of how our system is supposed to work. What's amazing is that it was, and right, was that it was justified in 1965. And let's not forget that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which prevents discrimination, both in purpose and effect, is still in place. Right. All over the country.
Right.
And so that your basic level of protection, which is very great and vigorously enforced by courts, is still in place.
Well, there's a considerable disagreement about the vigor of the law. There are many people who feel that the national standard, the national prohibition linked to ordinary court jurisdiction is not going to be as effective